She was left at the altar, and as everyone murmured, her millionaire boss approached slowly, leaned in, and whispered, "Play along, pretend I'm the groom. He's been waiting like an idiot for 2 hours." Music! I'd bet anything that coward bailed. Sophia squeezed her fingers against the half-open door of the ballroom, fighting the urge to run. The gravelly voice of her Uncle Frank cut through the stifled laughter of the group that had formed near the bar. 200 people gathered at the Ritz-Carlton, and she could hear every damn whisper as if they were shouting directly into her ear. Poor thing. Can you imagine the humiliation? A female voice Sophia couldn't identify responded. All that money Gerard spent the banquet, the flowers, the orchestra, and the groom didn't even have the balls to show up. A choked laugh. Another, and then another. The entire hall seemed to vibrate with barely concealed morbid curiosity. Sophia closed her eyes, trying to breathe, but the corset of her wedding dress was strangling her. Every inhalation hurt. Every second that passed sank her deeper into an abyss she didn't know how to escape. "I saw him this morning," posted an Instagram story. Someone else blurted out with that juicy, gossipy tone people relished. "He was at the airport, JFK Terminal 4 international flights. No, the guy left the country." "Are you kidding me? He went to Vegas with his buddies." "Here's the proof." "Check my phone." The murmur grew into a wave, carrying with it nervous giggles, feigned gasps of surprise, and increasingly merciless comments. Sophia felt her legs tremble beneath the weight of yards and yards of French lace. The bouquet of white roses slipped from her hands and hit the floor with a dull thud. Chloe, her best friend, quickly bent down to pick it up. "Soph, don't listen to them. They're a bunch of assholes," Chloe muttered, squeezing her arm desperately. "We'll cancel everything right now. We'll tell them there was an emergency." "An emergency?" Sophia's voice came out broken, unrecognizable. What kind of emergency explains the groom disappearing 2 hours before the wedding? They all know what happened, Chloe. All of them. And it was true. Phones were already burning up with screenshots, videos, private messages. Number wedding fail 2026 was probably already a trending topic on Twitter. By tomorrow, every last acquaintance, college classmates, forgotten Facebook contacts would have heard some distorted version of how Sophia Davis was abandoned at her own wedding. "Hey, you guys, for real!" The shrill voice of her Aunt Carol cut through the air like a rusty knife. "The girl's still in there, hiding like a mouse. Someone needs to tell her this whole thing's a bust. Let Gerard get his money back and let everyone go home." "Carol, don't be so insensitive," another voice replied, though without much conviction. "Poor Sophia must be devastated." "Well, yeah, but what do you want us to do? Sit here all afternoon waiting for a miracle?" The groom took off. "The circus is over." Circus. That word echoed in Sophia's head with the force of a hammer blow. That's what they all thought, that this was a spectacle, a juicy anecdote to share at the next family gathering. Remember when Sophia was left waiting at the altar like a fool? Laughter. More laughter, and she would be forever branded as the woman who wasn't enough for her fiancé to keep his promise. "Sophia, your dad's coming this way," Chloe warned, her eyes wide. "And he looks like he's about to explode." Gerard Davis was storming through the ballroom like a wounded bull, shoving chairs aside and pushing people without the slightest care. His face was red, the veins in his neck bulging, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. Sophia knew that expression. It was the same one he'd had when her younger brother wrecked the family car, the same one from when he discovered his business partner was stealing from him. The face of a man whose pride had just been trampled in front of the entire world. "Where is he?" he roared, reaching her. "Where is that son of a going? I'm going to kill him. I'm going to tear him to pieces." "Dad, please," Sophia whispered, but her voice was lost in the uproar. $500,000, her father shouted, pulling out his phone and waving it at the guests. "I spent $500,000 on this wedding, and the damned coward went to Vegas to get drunk with his friends. He posted it on Instagram. He's bragging about his getaway while my daughter is waiting for him here." The entire ballroom erupted. It wasn't whispers anymore. It was shouts, exclamations, phones being raised to record, to photograph, to document every second of the worst humiliation Sophia had experienced in her 28 years of life. Her mother appeared, running from the other side of the room, mascara streaking black furrows down her cheeks. "My baby, my poor baby," Patricia Davis sobbed, hugging her so tightly she nearly knocked her over. How could he do this to you? How? Let me go, Sophia murmured, trying to break free, but her mother's hands gripped her like vises. Mom, please, let me go. I'm going to sue him. Her father bellowed, furiously dialing numbers. I'm putting him in jail. He's going to pay for every single cent. He'll regret the day he was born. Gerard, calm down. One of her uncles tried to intervene, but it was useless. Calm down? Calm down? He made a fool of me, of my daughter, of my entire family. In front of my partners, my clients, in front of... Excuse me. The voice cut through the chaos like a scalpel, sharp and precise. Everyone turned. A tall man, athletically built, in an impeccable gray suit, was striding down the central aisle with measured steps. His presence radiated effortless authority, as if his very being there reorganized the energy in the room. Guests instinctively moved aside, creating a clear path. Sophia looked up, wiping tears with the back of her hand, and felt the world stop. Julian Croft, her boss, the most renowned architect in New York City, was walking straight toward her in the middle of the most shameful disaster of her life. Mr. Croft, Sophia stammered, a new wave of humiliation washing over her. I'm so sorry. You shouldn't be seeing this. But Julian didn't stop. He reached the makeshift altar, turned to face the crowd, and spoke with that deep voice Sophia had heard 1,000 times in business meetings, but never with this particular tone. Firm, protective, lethal. I sincerely apologize for the delay, he announced, looking at the guests with an impassive expression. I ran into some trouble with traffic on the FDR. An accident blocked 3 lanes. But I'm here now. The silence that followed was absolute. Sophia blinked, confused. Delay? What was he talking about? Julian turned back to her, closing the distance in 2 long strides. He leaned in just enough for only her to hear his next words, whispered with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. Play along, pretend I'm the groom. Sophia opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Julian took her left hand firmly, lacing his fingers through hers with a practiced ease. His dark eyes studied her with the same concentration he used when reviewing architectural plans, analyzing every detail, calculating every variable. Trust me, he added. So low the words barely brushed the air between them. Or let me do this for you. Your call. Sophia's world had shrunk to that single moment, to those eyes that looked at her without pity, without mockery, without the morbid curiosity she had seen in everyone else. Only determination, and something else she couldn't identify. Julian, you can't, she murmured, aware that 200 pairs of eyes were still fixed on them. This is insane. You can't just... I can, and I'm going to. So I need you to decide, right now. Do you want everyone here to go home with the story of how you were abandoned? Or would you rather give them something completely different to think about? Her father stepped forward, frowning. And who are you? What's going on here? Julian released Sophia's hand just long enough to extend his own toward Gerard Davis in a cordial gesture. Julian Croft, architect, Sophia's boss at the firm, and the man who's going to marry your daughter today. The collective gasp was deafening. Patricia Davis swayed, clutching her sister's arm for support. Gerard Davis stared at Julian as if he had just announced he was an alien. The murmurs exploded in every direction, mixing into an incomprehensible whirlwind of surprise, confusion, and disbelief. What the hell? Her father began, but Julian had already turned back to Sophia, completely ignoring the chaos he had just unleashed. He held out his open hand, patient, waiting, an invitation, an escape, a decision that would change everything. It's your decision, Sophia, he repeated, but decide now. She looked at that outstretched hand, then at her father, red with fury and confusion, at her mother, crying uncontrollably, at the guests with their phones held high, recording, waiting for the next chapter of the scandal, at Chloe, who stared at her, wide-eyed, not knowing what to do, and then she heard Uncle Frank's voice filter through the noise again. Who does this guy think he is? Superman to the rescue? This is getting good. More laughter, more ridicule, more humiliation. Sophia gritted her teeth, lifted her chin, and took Julian Croft's hand with such force she felt her fingers sink into his. Let's do it, she said, and her voice sounded firmer than it had in the last 3 hours. Julian nodded, a minimal smile curving the corner of his lips. Then he turned to the officiant, who was still standing by the altar with a look of utter bewilderment. "Sir, may we proceed with the ceremony? I apologize for the delay, but as I said, there were complications with the traffic." The officiant blinked several times, looking from Julian to Sophia to Gerard Davis and back to Julian. I need to verify the documents. The birth certificate, the groom's official ID, the witnesses. I have everything right here." Julian pulled a leather wallet from the inside of his jacket and extracted perfectly folded documents. "My ID, my birth certificate. The witnesses can be the same ones who were already designated. Any problem with that?" The officiant took the documents with trembling hands, reviewing them with professional meticulousness. Sophia took that moment to get closer to Julian and hiss between her teeth. "You bring your birth certificate to a wedding? Who does that?" "Someone who was prepared for any eventuality," he replied without looking at her, maintaining that mask of absolute serenity. "This is crazy. We can't actually get married. You're my boss. This doesn't make sense." "It makes perfect sense," Julian countered, finally turning to face her. "Or would you prefer your father ends up in jail for trying to kill Ryan when he finds him? Because believe me, he'll look for him. And knowing Mr. Davis's temper, it won't end well." Sophia glanced at her father, who was still clenching his fists, his face contorted, muttering threats as he dialed numbers on his phone. Julian was right. Her father was capable of catching the first flight to Vegas, finding Ryan, and doing something stupid he would regret for the rest of his life. "The documents are in order," the officiant announced, though his tone was still hesitant. "But I must advise you that this is a legally binding act. Once you sign, you will be legally married under the laws of this state. Are you certain you wish to proceed?" Julian looked at Sophia. She felt the weight of that gaze, the silent question it held. She could still back out, still say no, face the humiliation, let everyone go home with their version of the story. Or she could do this absolute madness that made no sense, but which, in some twisted way, did. "We're sure," Sophia replied, before her brain could convince her otherwise. The officiant nodded slowly. "Very well, then let us proceed." He turned to the guests, cleared his throat, and spoke in a professional voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin the civil ceremony between Miss Sophia Davis and Mr. Julian Croft. I ask for your silence and respect during the proceedings." The murmuring didn't stop completely, but it subsided to a more manageable level. The phones were still up, the faces still showed disbelief, but at least they weren't shouting anymore. Julian guided Sophia to the altar with measured steps, his hand firm on the small of her back, a protective gesture that sent shivers down her spine. "Are you okay?" he asked in a low voice as they positioned themselves before the officiant. "No," Sophia answered with brutal honesty. "None of this is okay. I know, but we're going to make it look like it is." The officiant began reciting the standard protocol, reading articles from the state code in a monotone voice. Sophia barely processed the words. Her mind was still spinning, trying to understand how she had gone from waiting for Ryan to standing at the altar with Julian Croft, her boss, the man with whom she had exchanged exactly 3 personal conversations in 3 years of working together. "Do you, Julian Croft, take Sophia Davis to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the officiant asked. "I do," Julian answered without hesitation, looking directly into her eyes. Sophia's heart skipped a beat. This was happening. It was really happening. "And do you, Sophia Davis, take Julian Croft to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Sophia opened her mouth. The words caught in her throat. Everyone was waiting. Julian was watching her with that intensity that made it impossible to look away. Her father was still frowning. Her mother was crying harder. Chloe was biting her nails. The guests held their breath. "I do," she finally whispered, and the 2 words came out like a sentence. "By the power vested in me by the state of New York, I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant announced. "You may kiss the bride." Sophia panicked. They hadn't planned for that. Well, they hadn't planned for any of this, but they definitely hadn't talked about kissing. Julian must have read the terror on her face because he leaned in just slightly, brushing his lips against hers in a contact so brief and chaste it barely qualified as a kiss. But it was enough to unleash a storm of applause, whistles, shouts, and camera flashes. "It's done," Julian murmured against her ear. "Now smile and breathe. The worst is over." But as they turned to face the guests, their hands intertwined and forced smiles on their faces, Sophia couldn't help but think that the worst was just beginning. The applause echoed like distant thunder as Sophia tried to process what she had just done. Married. She had married Julian Croft, her boss, the man who, 3 hours ago, she barely knew beyond executive meetings and corporate emails. His hand was still holding hers firmly, anchoring her to a reality that felt completely surreal. "Congratulations, sweetheart," Sophia's mother stumbled over, dabbing at her smudged mascara with a soaked tissue. "Welcome to the family. We didn't know that Sophia and you—" Her voice broke before she could finish the sentence. Julian inclined his head respectfully, releasing Sophia's hand just long enough to give Patricia Davis a brief hug. "I'm very sorry for the confusion, ma'am. Everything happened very quickly between us. We didn't mean to cause any trouble." "Trouble?" Gerard Davis appeared behind his wife, his face still red, but his fury now transformed into bewilderment. "Young man, you owe me an explanation. My daughter was engaged to another man 5 minutes ago, and now it turns out that—" "Dad, please," Sophia interrupted, feeling panic begin to climb her throat. "Not now. There are 200 people waiting. We can talk later." Her father looked at her as if she were a stranger. And maybe she was. The Sophia he knew would never have done something like this, never would have made a decision so impulsive, so irrational, so completely out of character. But that Sophia hadn't been jilted at her wedding in front of all her family and friends. "Your father is right to want answers," Julian intervened calmly, "and I will give them to him. But as Sophia said, right now we must attend to our guests. They spent time and effort to be here. It would be rude of us not to thank them for their presence." Julian's cool, reasonable logic disarmed any argument. Gerard clenched his jaw, nodded curtly, and walked away, muttering something unintelligible. Patricia Davis looked at them both with teary eyes before following her husband. Sophia exhaled the breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "Breathe," Julian murmured without looking at her, maintaining that polite smile as he nodded to guests who were beginning to approach. "Keep your composure. Just a few more hours, and this is over." "And then what?" Sophia hissed between her teeth, forcing a smile as Aunt Carol passed them with a suspicious look. "Then we figure it out. But right now I need you to act as if this is exactly what you wanted." Chloe came running, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Soph, what the hell just happened? You married your boss? Are you insane?" "Probably," Sophia admitted, feeling hysteria threaten to bubble up from her chest. "But it's done, Chloe. I signed. I said yes. It's done." "You must be Chloe," Julian interrupted, extending his free hand toward Sophia's best friend. "I've heard so much about you. Sophia talks about you all the time." Chloe shook his hand warily, studying him as if he were a puzzle she needed to solve. "I don't remember Sophia mentioning anything about you two. Not once." "We preferred to keep it private," Julian replied, without flinching. Given the professional circumstances, it seemed the most sensible thing to do. Right, sensible. Because getting married by surprise in the middle of a disaster is so sensible. "Chloe, please," Sophia begged. "Not now." Her friend looked at her with a mixture of concern and frustration before sighing. "Fine. But you and I are having a very long talk after this. Got it?" Sophia was grateful that at least Chloe wasn't making an additional scene. The event coordinator approached with his clipboard, looking considerably more relieved than he had 20 minutes ago. "Mr. and Mrs. Croft, shall we proceed with the reception?" "The banquet is ready, the orchestra is awaiting instructions, and the guests are starting to ask about the toast." Julian consulted his watch, a Patek Philippe that probably cost more than Sophia's car. "Go ahead, everything is planned." "Perfect. Then, if you'll accompany me to the main ballroom." The next 30 minutes were a blur of smiling faces, forced congratulations, and curious glances. Sophia shook more hands than she could count, received hugs from relatives she barely knew, and smiled until her cheeks ached. Julian moved beside her with practiced ease, answering questions with elegant evasions, deflecting uncomfortable conversations toward safer topics. "Your husband is handsome," a distant cousin whispered in her ear, "and you can tell he has money. Just look at that suit, those shoes. That watch must cost as much as my house." "Yes," Sophia replied automatically, not knowing what else to say. "So how did you meet? Because just yesterday you told me you were marrying Ryan, and now—" "It's complicated," Sophia cut in. "Excuse me, I think my mom is calling me." She fled before her cousin could ask any more questions, taking temporary refuge beside one of the columns decorated with white flower garlands, trying to catch her breath. The corset was still squeezing her ribs, the veil felt like it weighed a ton on her head, her high heels were killing her feet, and worst of all was the constant feeling of acting in a play where no one had given her the script. "Are you okay?" Julian's voice startled her. She hadn't heard him approach. He offered her a glass of champagne, which she accepted with trembling hands. "No," she admitted, taking a long sip that burned her throat. "I'm not okay. None of this is okay. I know, but you're handling it better than you think." "Better?" "Julian, I just married you. I don't even know what your favorite color is. I don't know if you have siblings. I don't know where you live. I know absolutely nothing about you, except that you're an architectural genius and you hate decaf coffee." A minimal smile curved Julian's lips. "Navy blue. I have a sister who lives in Barcelona. I live in a penthouse in Soho, and I'm right to hate decaf coffee because it's a blasphemy against nature." Despite everything, Sophia felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in her chest. "This is insane." "Completely," Julian agreed. "But it's a solvable insanity. Listen, I know this is a lot. I know you don't know me, but I promise you, we are going to fix this. We just need to get through today. Let people go home peacefully, and tomorrow we'll sit down and talk calmly about what's next." "And what is next?" Sophia asked, looking at him directly. "A quickie divorce? Pretend for a while? What exactly did you plan when you decided to do this?" Julian studied her in silence for a moment that felt eternal. There was something in his eyes that Sophia couldn't decipher, something deeper than simple compassion or a sense of duty. "Whatever you need it to be," he finally answered. "I did this for you, Sophia. Not out of obligation, not out of pity, because—" "The bride and groom for the toast," the coordinator announced with excessive enthusiasm, interrupting whatever Julian was about to say. Sophia wanted to scream for him to wait, that she needed to hear the end of that sentence. But they were already being guided to the center of the ballroom, where 2 crystal glasses awaited them on a decorated table. The orchestra began to play a romantic melody. The guests formed a circle around them. The phones were raised again, capturing every angle. Julian took his glass and raised it, looking first at the guests before turning to Sophia. "I want to thank everyone for being here today. I know the circumstances have been unusual, but life rarely follows the plans we make. Sometimes it surprises us. Sometimes it gives us exactly what we need when we least expect it." He paused, and his eyes met Sophia's with an intensity that took her breath away. "Sophia, from the first day you walked into the firm, I knew you were different. Your dedication, your intelligence, your ability to solve problems others don't even see. But more than that, your kindness, the way you treat every single person with respect, no matter their position. That's not something you can teach. That's just who you are." Sophia felt tears welling up in her eyes. These weren't empty words. Julian said them with a conviction that rang true. "I don't know what the future holds for us," he continued. "No one does, but I know I want to face it with you. So I toast to us, to the unexpected, to the imperfect, and to having the courage to take a leap of faith when the ground disappears from beneath our feet." Applause erupted. Guests cheered. Someone shouted, "Kiss! Kiss!" And soon the entire room was chanting the same thing. Julian arched an eyebrow in a silent question. Sophia nodded slightly, bracing herself for another chaste brush of the lips like at the altar. But when Julian's lips met hers this time, it was neither brief nor chaste. It was slow, deliberate, consuming. One hand slid to her waist, pulling her closer. The other cupped her face with a tenderness that contrasted with the intensity of the kiss. Sophia felt the world dissolve at the edges. The noise turn into a distant hum, every nerve ending in her body coming alive for the first time in months. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathless. The guests went wild with whistles and applause, but Sophia barely heard them. She could only look at Julian, at those dark eyes that now shone with something that was definitely not an act. "What was that?" she whispered, still dazed. "Convincing performance," Julian replied, but his voice was hoarse, affected. "That wasn't a performance." "No," he admitted after a moment. "It wasn't." Before Sophia could process that confession, the orchestra began to play the couple's first dance. Julian led her to the center of the dance floor, his hand firm on the small of her back. The guests moved aside, forming a circle, watching as they began to move to the rhythm of the music. "Do you know how to dance?" Sophia asked, aware of every inch where their bodies touched. "I had mandatory classes in college," Julian replied. "Architecture and ballroom dancing. An odd combination, I know. Odd, but useful for moments like this. Moments like spontaneously marrying your boss? Yes, definitely something worth including on a university curriculum." Sophia laughed, a genuine laugh that surprised even her. "He has a sense of humor. I didn't know that. There are a lot of things you don't know about me," Julian murmured, spinning her gracefully. "But you'll have time to find out." "How much time exactly? Because this can't last forever. Eventually someone is going to realize that—" "Shh," he interrupted, pulling her a little closer. "Don't think about that now. Just dance with me. Just for this one song. Forget everything else." And Sophia did. She allowed herself to close her eyes, to rest her head against Julian's shoulder, to feel the music envelop them. She allowed herself to forget that 4 hours ago she was waiting for another man. To forget that this was a farce born of desperation. To forget that at some point she would have to face the consequences of this impulsive decision. For that one song, for those 3 minutes and 40 seconds, she let herself pretend this was real. Night had fallen over New York City by the time the last guest finally left. Sophia watched the car lights disappear from the hotel parking lot through one of the ballroom windows, aware that the moment she had been postponing for 6 hours had finally arrived. There were no more acts to maintain, no more forced smiles or superficial conversations. It was just her and Julian, and a reality neither of them knew how to face. "Do you want me to call your family?" Julian's voice broke the silence from somewhere behind her. "Your father left pretty upset. Maybe we should clear things up with them tonight." Sophia shook her head without turning. "No, not tonight. I don't have the energy for any more confrontations today." Julian's footsteps drew closer until she could see his reflection in the window pane, standing less than a yard away. He had taken off his jacket and loosened his tie. The sleeves of his white shirt were rolled up, revealing tanned and surprisingly muscular forearms for someone who spent most of his time behind a desk. Sophia looked away from the image, feeling an uncomfortable heat creep up her neck. "I booked the bridal suite," Julian said. The event coordinator insisted. "Apparently, it's included in the package your father paid for." The bridal suite. Of course, because that was exactly what this disaster needed, sharing a romantic room with the man who was technically her husband but was still practically a stranger. "I can get another room if you'd prefer," Julian added quickly, as if he'd read her discomfort. "In fact, that's probably for the best. I don't want you to feel pressured or—" "No," Sophia interrupted, surprising herself. "We've made enough of a scene for one day. If any of the staff sees us sleeping separately on our wedding night, it'll be all over the hotel gossip chain by morning." Julian nodded slowly. "So we share the suite. I can sleep on the couch." "Julian, you're like 6'2". You won't fit on any couch. I've slept in worse places during construction projects. I'll be fine." The tension between them was palpable, like a taut electrical wire about to snap. Sophia finally turned to face him, crossing her arms over her chest. The wedding dress suddenly felt ridiculous. An elaborate costume for a fantasy that never existed. "Why did you do it?" she asked, needing to hear the answer they'd been interrupted from earlier. "And don't tell me it was out of compassion or a sense of duty. No one marries someone for those reasons." Julian looked at her for a long moment, his dark eyes scanning her face as if searching for the right words in a language he didn't quite master. He finally sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up for the first time all day. "Because I couldn't just stand there and watch them tear you apart," he admitted. "I heard what they were saying, the comments, the laughter, the morbid curiosity, and I saw your face when you came out of that room. I saw you trying to hold it together while your world was falling apart, and I couldn't stand it. But that doesn't explain why you decided to marry me. You could have done 1,000 different things. You could have gotten me out of there, canceled everything, helped me escape. I didn't have to marry you," Julian finished for her. "You're right. I didn't have to. But in that moment, it seemed like the only solution that solved all the problems at once. Your father was about to do something he would regret. Your family was going to spend weeks, maybe months, processing the humiliation. The guests would have left with a story that would follow you for years. And you would have blamed yourself for all of it when none of this was your fault." Sophia felt the tears she had been holding back all day finally begin to overflow. She tried to wipe them away quickly, but Julian had already stepped closer, offering her a cloth handkerchief from his pocket. "Don't cry," he murmured with a softness Sophia had never heard from him before. "You've cried enough for a man who doesn't deserve it." "So what now?" Sophia asked, her voice cracking. "What do we do with this marriage? Do we get a divorce next week? Do we pretend for a while? Do we keep working together like nothing happened?" "Honestly, I don't know," Julian admitted. "I didn't have a plan beyond today. I just knew I had to help you in that moment." "That's very noble of you. But marriages don't work on nobility. They work on love," Julian suggested, and something in his tone made Sophia look at him more closely. "Yes, love. And we don't love each other. We barely know each other." Julian took another step closer, closing the distance between them to inches. Sophia had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact, aware of every breath, every accelerated beat of her heart. "Want to know a secret?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "That kiss on the dance floor, that wasn't an act, and I think you felt it too." Sophia opened her mouth to deny it, but the words stuck in her throat. Because he was right. She had felt it. That moment when everything else disappeared and it was just the two of them, moving to the music, connected in a way that had no logical explanation. "That doesn't mean anything," she finally managed to say. "It was adrenaline. The heat of the moment. It was chemistry," Julian suggested, and the slight smile that curved his lips made Sophia's stomach do a flip. "Because that's what it was, Sophia. Chemistry. And you can't fake that. You can't manufacture it. It either exists or it doesn't." "Are you insane?" she murmured, taking a step back. "This is insane. 12 hours ago you were just my boss. Now you're my husband and you're talking about chemistry and you're scared," Julian interrupted. "I get it. I am too. But that doesn't change the fact that there's something here. Something worth exploring." "Exploring?" Sophia let out a hysterical laugh. "Julian, we're not teenagers experimenting with first love. We're two adults who made an impulsive decision and now have to deal with the consequences." "You're right," he conceded. "We're adults, so let's act like it. Let's talk honestly about what we want." "And what is it that you want?" The question hung between them like an undetonated bomb. Julian looked at her with that intensity that made it impossible to look away, those eyes that seemed to see past the defenses Sophia had carefully built all day. "I want to give you time," he finally answered. "Time to process what happened with Ryan. Time to get to know me beyond the boss-employee relationship. Time to decide what you want to do with this marriage, without pressure or expectations. And in the meantime, we live. We go on with our lives. I'm not going to demand anything from you. I'm not going to push this to be something you're not ready for. But I'm also not going to pretend I don't feel what I feel." Sophia felt her heart accelerate dangerously. "And what is it that you feel?" Julian took another step toward her, so close now that Sophia could feel the heat radiating from his body. She could smell the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with something more personal, more masculine. "I feel that kiss was the most real thing that's happened to me in years," he murmured. "I feel that when I see you every morning at the office, my day instantly gets better. I feel that getting to know your real laugh, the one you let out when you think no one is listening, is something I want to experience every day. And I feel that what I did today wasn't just to save you from humiliation. It was also because the idea of another man hurting you was unbearable to me." The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia could hear her own ragged breathing. She could feel how every one of Julian's words was embedding itself somewhere deep in her chest, in a place she had kept locked away for the last few months with Ryan. "I can't process this right now," she whispered finally. "It's too much. Everything is too much." "I know." Julian stepped back, giving her space. "That's why I propose that tonight we just rest. Tomorrow, with clearer heads, we can start to figure all this out." Sophia nodded, grateful for the temporary truce. Julian walked to the door where the event coordinator had left their suitcases before leaving. He took Sophia's and placed it near the bathroom. "Take a shower, change, get comfortable. I'll wait out here." "Julian," Sophia stopped him when his hand was on the doorknob. "Thank you, for everything, for today, for saving me." He turned, and the smile he gave her was genuine, warm, completely different from the professional expressions Sophia had seen for 3 years at the office. "I didn't save you, Sophia. I just reminded you that you're strong enough to save yourself." When the door closed behind him, Sophia collapsed onto the edge of the king-sized bed, which was covered in rose petals. She picked up one of the petals, feeling its soft, fragile texture. The entire suite was decorated for a romantic night she was supposed to share with Ryan. Scented candles, champagne, heart-shaped chocolates on the pillows. But Ryan was in Vegas, probably drunk in some bar, celebrating his successful escape. And she was here, married to a man who had just confessed to having feelings for her, a man who knew her better than she thought, a man who had risked everything to protect her from the biggest humiliation of her life. Sophia looked at her reflection in the dresser mirror. Her makeup was smudged, her hair a mess, the dress wrinkled. She looked exactly how she felt, destroyed and reassembled at the same time, like something that had been broken and glued back together with a different, stronger, more resilient material. She slowly unzipped the wedding dress, letting it fall to the floor in a heap of lace and satin. She stared at it for a long moment before kicking it into a corner. Tomorrow she would have to deal with the explanations, the consequences, with all the decisions she had made today. Tomorrow she would have to face her family, talk to Julian about the next steps, decipher what all of this really meant. But tonight she just wanted to close her eyes and pretend, if only for a few hours, that the world made sense. The hot water from the shower beat against Sophia's back with a pressure that was almost painful, but it was exactly what she needed. She let the steam fill the marble bathroom as she tried to process the last 12 hours of her life. 12 hours. That's all it had taken for her world to be turned completely upside down. She closed her eyes, resting her hands against the cool tiles, and allowed the day's events to flood her mind without a filter. Ryan abandoning her. The cruel whispers of the guests, Julian appearing like an impossible apparition, the kiss at the altar, the toast, the dance, and then that conversation in the suite, those words that had ignited something in her chest she didn't know how to name. "I feel that kiss was the most real thing that's happened to me in years." Julian's words echoed in her head. How was it possible that a man she barely knew could say exactly what she needed to hear? And why did her body react this way every time he came near? He was her boss, for God's sake. Her handsome, intelligent, successful boss who had apparently been watching her for 3 years without her ever noticing. Sophia turned off the shower and stepped out, wrapping herself in a fluffy white towel. She checked her suitcase, mentally thanking Chloe for packing something other than the ridiculous lingerie set she'd bought for her honeymoon. She found a pair of comfortable cotton pajamas, nothing seductive, perfect for the awkward situation she was in. When she came out of the bathroom, she found Julian standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. He had changed into a gray t-shirt and sweatpants. Without the formal suit, he looked younger, more approachable, less like the millionaire architect, and more like a normal man dealing with an extraordinary situation. "Feeling better?" he asked without turning, as if he had sensed her presence. "Cleaner, at least," Sophia replied, running a hand through her damp hair. "I'm not sure better is the right word." Julian finally turned, and Sophia noticed the lines of exhaustion around his eyes. It had been a long day for both of them. He gestured to the room service he'd ordered while she was in the shower. 2 plates of pasta, a salad, bread, and a bottle of red wine. "I thought you might be hungry. You didn't eat anything at the reception." Sophia felt her stomach rumble in response. He was right. She had been so busy smiling and acting that she hadn't had a bite since breakfast, which now seemed like a lifetime ago. "Thank you," she murmured, sitting in one of the armchairs near the table. "You didn't have to do this." "Of course I did." Julian sat across from her, pouring wine into 2 glasses. "You need to eat, and I need to process all this with something in my stomach too." They ate in silence for the first few minutes, a silence that was surprisingly not uncomfortable. It was almost companionable, as if, after surviving the day's battle together, they had earned the right to simply exist in each other's space without needing to fill every second with words. "What are you going to tell your family tomorrow?" Julian finally asked, setting down his fork. "Your father practically demanded an explanation." Sophia sighed, taking a long sip of her wine. "The truth, I guess, or at least a version of it. That Ryan left me, that you helped me, that things got complicated. And work?" This question had been gnawing at her since she signed the marriage license. I don't know. How are we going to handle this? We can't just keep working together like nothing happened. The whole firm is going to find out. They probably already have, Julian pointed out. Social media moves fast. By tomorrow morning, everyone in the office will have seen at least 3 different versions of what happened today. Sophia felt nauseous. She hadn't thought about that. Her coworkers, the clients, the vendors, they would all know she had married her boss on the same day her fiancé abandoned her. The speculation would be merciless. Hey! Julian's voice pulled her out of her spiral of panic. Look at me. She obeyed, meeting those dark eyes that studied her with genuine concern. We are going to handle this together, he continued. If anyone has something to say, they can say it to my face. And if anyone dares to disrespect you, they will have to answer to me. Understood? The protective ferocity in his voice stirred something in Sophia's chest. Ryan had never defended her like that. He had never fought for her. She had always been the one to smooth things over, apologize for things that weren't her fault, make everything work. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. Why do you care so much? Julian put his glass down and leaned forward, shortening the distance between them. Because for 3 years I've watched you give your all at that firm. Watched you come in early, leave late, solve problems that aren't your responsibility. Watched you smile even when I know you're tired or frustrated. And I also saw you with Ryan. Sophia blinked, surprised. What? The few times he came to the office to pick you up, I saw how he talked to you like you were his personal assistant instead of his partner, like your accomplishments were less important than his. And I saw how you made yourself smaller every time he was around, as if you needed to take up less space so he could shine brighter. The words hit Sophia like punches because they were true. Every single one was true, and the fact that Julian had noticed, when she herself was only just beginning to admit it, was devastating. I loved him, she whispered, though the words sounded hollow even to her. Did you love him, or did you love the idea of what you were supposed to be? Julian asked gently. Because from the outside, Sophia, it didn't look like love. It looked like habit. It looked like fear of being alone. It looked like you were settling for less than you deserve because it was easier than admitting you were with the wrong man. Sophia felt tears threatening to spill again, but this time they weren't tears of humiliation or sadness. They were tears of recognition, of finally hearing out loud what her subconscious had been screaming at her for months. He made me feel small, she admitted, the words coming out in a broken whisper. Smaller and smaller, and I let him because I was afraid that if I demanded more, I'd be left with nothing. Julian rose from his chair and knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. The gesture was so unexpected, so tender, that Sophia couldn't help but stare into those eyes that saw her as if she were something precious, something worth protecting. Listen to me very carefully, Sophia Davis, he said, with an intensity that took her breath away. You are not small. You are brilliant, talented, and capable of things most people can't even imagine. And any man who doesn't see that, who doesn't celebrate that every single damn day, doesn't deserve a second of your time. Julian, and I know this is complicated. I know your life just exploded, and the last thing you need is more pressure. But I also need you to know that when I look at you, I don't see an executive assistant. I don't see an employee. I see an extraordinary woman who deserves to be loved exactly as she is, without having to make herself small so someone else can feel big. Sophia felt her heart pounding so hard she was sure Julian could hear it. The defenses she had been carefully maintaining all night began to crack, revealing something vulnerable and terrifying underneath. I don't know how to do this, she confessed. I don't know how to be your wife. I don't know how to let you in. I'm scared. Of what? He prompted when she hesitated. That this is too good to be true. That I'll wake up tomorrow and find out you were just being kind because you felt sorry for me. That when you really get to know me, when you see all my flaws and my insecurities, you'll realize I wasn't worth the risk you took. Julian released one of her hands to caress her cheek with his thumb, wiping away a stray tear. Do you want to know what I see when I look at you? I see someone who shows up every day and gives her best, even when no one is watching. I see someone who treats the cleaning staff with the same respect she gives to billionaire clients. I see someone who stayed until 2 a.m. helping a colleague with a project that wasn't even her responsibility. I see strength disguised as kindness. I see intelligence mixed with humility. And yes, I see insecurities and flaws, because you're human. But that doesn't make you any less extraordinary. It makes you real." Sophia didn't know who moved first. Maybe they both did at the same time, drawn by a force neither could name. All she knew was that suddenly Julian's lips were on hers, and this kiss was not like the others. It wasn't for an audience, it wasn't an act. It was hunger and need and something much more dangerous. Julian's hands tangled in her damp hair, pulling her closer. Sophia responded with the same intensity, letting all the pain and confusion of the day transform into this physical connection that made more sense than any words. They moved clumsily toward the bed, stumbling over the coffee table, laughing against each other's lips when they nearly fell. Julian laid her gently on the mattress, propping himself above her with his arms on either side of her head. His eyes scanned hers with a silent question, giving her space to pull back if she needed it. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice rough. "We can stop. You don't have to do anything you don't want to." Sophia looked at him. This man who had appeared out of nowhere and changed everything. This man who really saw her in a way no one else ever had. And she made a decision. "I'm sure," she whispered, pulling him down to her. "For the first time in a long time, I am completely sure of something." And when their bodies met, when every touch ignited nerve endings Sophia had forgotten she had, when whispers turned to moans and caresses became desperate, she knew she had crossed a line from which there was no return. This was no longer a farce, no longer an act. It was real, tangible, all-consuming. And for the first time since she woke up that morning believing she would marry Ryan, Sophia felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The morning light filtered through the suite's curtains as Sophia awoke, wrapped in sheets that smelled of him and a warmth she hadn't experienced in years. Julian slept beside her, one arm draped protectively over her waist. His face looked younger in repose. The lines of tension softened, his lips slightly parted in an expression of absolute peace. Sophia allowed herself to watch him for a long moment, processing the magnitude of what had happened. 24 hours ago, she was preparing to marry Ryan, convinced she was making the right choice. Now she was here, naked under the sheets with a man who had been practically a stranger and who somehow knew her better than anyone. Julian's phone vibrated on the nightstand, breaking the morning stillness. He stirred slightly, tightening his hold on Sophia's waist before his eyes fluttered open. When he saw her watching him, a slow, devastating smile curved his lips. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "Good morning," Sophia replied, feeling heat rise in her cheeks as she remembered the previous night with perfect clarity. Julian reached for his phone, frowning at the screen. 32 messages, 15 missed calls. "This is going to be interesting." "From who?" "Your family, mostly. Some from the office, too, and apparently, my sister in Barcelona found out and is demanding an immediate explanation." Sophia groaned, burying her face in the pillow. "I don't want to deal with this yet. Can we just stay here forever and pretend the outside world doesn't exist?" Julian laughed, a deep sound that rumbled in Sophia's chest. "I'd love to, but eventually we have to face the music, or at least answer a few texts before your father comes to break down the door." As if summoned, Sophia's phone began to ring. Her mother's name flashed on the screen. Sophia looked at Julian in obvious panic. "Answer it," he urged. "The longer we wait, the worse it will be." Sophia took a deep breath and answered. "Mom? Sophia Davis, where are you? Are you okay? Your father and I have been up all night trying to understand what on earth happened yesterday. How did you end up married to your boss?" "Mom, calm down. I'm fine. I'm in the hotel suite with Julian." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then, in a carefully controlled tone, her mother asked, "With Julian? In the suite? Together? We're husband and wife, Mom. Technically, this is where we're supposed to be." "Don't give me technicalities, young lady. Yesterday you were going to marry Ryan. Today you wake up with a completely different man. How do you expect us to process this?" Sophia felt Julian's hand slide onto her thigh in a silent gesture of support. That simple touch gave her the courage she needed to continue. "Ryan abandoned me, Mom. He left the country knowing I was waiting for him at the altar. Julian helped me when I needed it most. And yes, I know it all happened very fast, but it was my decision. No one forced me. And now what? Are you going to continue with this farce, or are you going to get a divorce like any sensible person would after an impulsive marriage?" The question hung in the air. Sophia looked at Julian, searching for any indication of his thoughts, but his dark eyes only reflected the same question back at her. What now? I don't know, Mom, Sophia admitted honestly. We're still figuring out what this is, but I promise you it wasn't a farce. And I didn't make this decision lightly. Her mother sighed heavily. Your father wants to talk to you, and to Julian, today. He says if this man is going to be your husband, he deserves to know him beyond a wedding day emergency. Okay, I'll tell Julian. Where do you want to meet? At the house. Noon. And Sophia? Her voice softened slightly. I just want to know that you're okay. That this is what you really want. Sophia looked at Julian again, at this man who had swept into her life like a hurricane and changed everything. This man who had watched her fall apart and, instead of walking away, had chosen to hold her up. This man who had made her feel more in one night than Ryan had in 2 years. I'm okay, Mom, she replied with a certainty that surprised even herself. Better than I've been in a very long time. When she hung up, Julian was already sitting up in bed, scrolling through his own messages with a concentrated expression. Sophia took the moment to watch him unabashedly. The morning light played across the lines of his back, highlighting muscles that definitely didn't come from sitting behind a desk all day. What? He asked without turning, but she could hear the smile in his voice. Nothing. Just wondering how I never noticed my boss is incredibly fit. Julian turned with an arched eyebrow. Incredibly fit? That's all I get after last night. Sophia laughed, throwing a pillow at him, which he caught easily. You're impossible. And you're beautiful, he replied with a simplicity that stopped Sophia's heart. Especially in the morning, with your hair all messy and that smile you try to hide. The moment turned intimate again, charged with the chemistry that had exploded between them the night before. Julian set his phone aside and moved closer, capturing Sophia's lips in a slow, deep kiss that promised more. We have to go see my parents, Sophia murmured against his lips when they finally broke apart. I know, they're going to ask a million questions. I'm prepared. My dad will probably try to intimidate you. He won't be the first. Sophia pulled back to look at him directly. Julian, this is serious. They're going to want to know what we are, what we're going to do, if this is real or temporary, and I don't know how to answer those questions. Julian cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to hold his gaze. Then we answer together. With the truth. And what is the truth? That it started as an impulse to save you from a horrible situation, but that somewhere during the night it stopped being an act and became something real. Something I want to explore. Something I think is worth trying for. What if it doesn't work? Sophia asked quietly. What if in a month or two we find out it was just the adrenaline of the moment? What if we ruin everything we had before by chasing something that isn't meant to last? And what if it does work? Julian countered. What if this is exactly what we both needed, and we were just too blind or too scared to see it? What if wasting this opportunity out of fear is the real mistake? Sophia closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision. She could run now. She could ask Julian to annul the marriage, pretend none of this happened, go back to the safe, predictable dynamic of boss and employee. It would be the sensible option, the one her rational brain was screaming at her to take. But her heart, that treacherous organ that had been dormant for so long, had finally woken up, and it was telling her something completely different. I want to try, she whispered, opening her eyes to meet Julian's intense gaze. I want to see where this goes. But I need you to be honest with me. If at any point you change your mind, if you regret doing this, I need you to tell me. I can't survive another abandonment. The pain that crossed Julian's face was visceral. Sophia, look at me. Really look at me. I am not Ryan. I'm not going to disappear when things get tough. I'm not going to make you feel small to make myself feel big. And I am definitely not going to abandon you because I get scared of what I feel. And what is it that you feel? Julian smiled. That slow, devastating smile that did dangerous things to Sophia's heart rate. I'm still figuring it out. But I know that when I see you, something in my chest tightens. I know your laugh is my favorite sound. I know the idea of seeing you every day makes me want to get up in the morning. And I know that what happened last night was just the beginning of something much bigger. Sophia felt tears stinging her eyes, but this time they were tears of relief, of hope, of finally feeling chosen, without conditions. I need a shower, she announced, trying to lighten the mood before she completely fell apart. And coffee. Lots of coffee. Want some company in that shower? Julian asked with a mischievous grin. Absolutely not. If you come in there with me, we'll never leave this suite, and my parents will literally send the police to find us. Julian laughed, kissing her one more time before letting her go. Fine. I'll order breakfast. What do you like? Surprise me. As Sophia disappeared into the bathroom, Julian picked up his phone and decided to deal with the messages from his sister, Elena, each one more insistent than the last. He opted for a video call, bracing for the inevitable interrogation. Elena's face appeared on the screen, her expression a mix of amusement and exasperation. Julian Croft, you got married and you didn't even tell me? Good morning to you too, Elena. Don't you good morning me. Explain yourself, right now. I saw the pictures on Instagram. Who is she? And why do all the comments say it was a surprise wedding because the other groom didn't show up? Julian sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's complicated. I've got time. And it had better be a good story because Mom is freaking out. She's already booked a flight for tomorrow. Of course she did, Julian muttered. Look, the short version is, Sophia works for me. Her fiancé abandoned her at the altar. I stepped in. We got married. And it turns out there's something real here worth exploring. Elena stared at him for a long moment before bursting into laughter. Only you would pull something like this, little brother. Only you. It wasn't planned, obviously. But tell me, is there really something there, or are you just playing the knight in shining armor? Julian thought about the night before, about every kiss, every touch, every word whispered in the dark. He thought about how it felt to wake up with Sophia in his arms, as if something that had been misaligned for years had finally clicked into place. There's something, he admitted, something big. Elena's smile softened. Then fight for it. Don't let what other people think dictate what you do. If she's special, if this is real, don't let her go. I don't plan to. Good. Now put her on the phone. I want to meet my new sister-in-law before Mom gets there and scares her off with her intensity. Julian laughed. She's in the shower, but I promise you'll meet her soon. And Elena? Thanks. For what? For not judging. For believing in me. Always, brother. Always. The Davises' house in Westchester looked exactly as it always had, cozy, filled with plants, and with that smell of freshly brewed coffee that had been the backdrop to Sophia's entire childhood. But as Julian parked his Mercedes in the driveway, Sophia felt like she was about to walk onto a battlefield. Ready? Julian asked, turning off the engine and looking at her. No, Sophia admitted honestly, but I guess that doesn't matter. Julian took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers with a naturalness that still surprised her. Remember, we're a team. Whatever happens in there, we face it together. Those words gave her the courage she needed. They got out of the car and walked to the front door, where Patricia Davis was already waiting with an unreadable expression. When she saw their joined hands, something in her face softened slightly. Come in, she said simply, stepping aside. Gerard Davis was sitting in the living room, arms crossed, brow furrowed in that expression Sophia knew all too well. Surprisingly, Chloe was there too, offering Sophia a supportive smile from an armchair. Sit, her father commanded, pointing to the sofa opposite him. Julian waited for Sophia to sit before taking the seat beside her, keeping her hand firmly in his. The gesture did not go unnoticed by Gerard, whose gaze fixed on their joined hands with an almost physical intensity. So, her father began, is someone going to explain to me what the hell happened yesterday? Because from my perspective, my daughter was about to marry one man, that man disappeared, and suddenly you, he pointed at Julian, show up and end up marrying her. Can you tell me how that makes any sense at all? Julian leaned forward, not letting go of Sophia's hand. You're right, Mr. Davis. From the outside, it doesn't make sense. It looks impulsive, irrational, even irresponsible. But if you'll allow me, I'd like to explain exactly why I made that decision. Gerard waved a dismissive hand. I'm listening. I've worked with Sophia for 3 years, Julian began. In that time, I've seen her become one of the best professionals I've ever known. But more than that, I've seen who she is as a person. Her dedication, her integrity, the way she treats everyone with respect, no matter their position. I also saw her with Ryan on the few occasions he came to the office. The name Ryan made Gerard's jaw clench visibly. And every time I saw them together, Julian continued, I wondered why such an extraordinary woman was settling for someone who clearly didn't value her, someone who treated her like an accessory instead of a partner, someone who made her feel she had to be less so he could be more. Sophia felt tears sting her eyes, hearing those words spoken aloud in front of her family. Yesterday, when I saw what was happening, when I heard the guests' comments, when I saw the humiliation on Sophia's face, I knew I had two options. Julian looked directly at Gerard. I could stand by and do nothing, let the situation play out, and allow your daughter to be publicly destroyed. Or I could do something about it. And marrying her was the only option? Patricia asked from her spot by the window. In that moment, it seemed like the only one that solved all the problems at once, Julian admitted. But I didn't just do it for her. I also did it because for months, maybe years, I've wanted to tell her how I felt, and never had the courage. Yesterday gave me the perfect, albeit unconventional, opportunity to show her. The silence that followed was so thick Sophia could hear the ticking of the wall clock in the kitchen. Her father was looking at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. Her mother had her hands over her heart. Chloe was smiling openly. "Dad," Sophia finally spoke, her voice trembling but firm. "I know this is a lot to process. Believe me, I'm trying to understand it too. But I need you to know something. What happened yesterday wasn't a farce. It wasn't charity. It was the first time in years that someone really saw me, saw all of me, with my flaws and insecurities, and decided I was worth sticking around for." Gerard closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. When he opened them again, there was something different in his gaze, something softer. "Ryan called me this morning," he said, and everyone in the room tensed. "From Vegas, drunk, crying, saying he made a mistake, that he got scared, that he wants to come back and fix things." Sophia felt Julian squeeze her hand instinctively, but she kept her eyes fixed on her father. "And what did you tell him?" A slow, almost ferocious smile curved Gerard's lips. "I told him it was too late, that my daughter was already married to a man who had the guts to show up when he ran away, and that if he ever came near you again, I would personally make sure he regretted it." Sophia let out a laugh mixed with a sob. Julian smiled too, clearly relieved. "But that doesn't mean this is okay," her father continued, turning to Julian. "You're my daughter's boss. There's a power dynamic there that worries me. How do I know Sophia can make decisions freely? How do I know she won't feel pressured, obligated?" "I'll step down," Julian said without hesitation. Everyone stared at him in surprise, including Sophia. "What?" she asked. "Julian, you can't resign from your own company." "I'm not resigning from the company," Julian clarified. "I'm resigning as your direct supervisor. I'll have my partner reassign you to another department, under another lead. Or better yet, we can promote you to project manager, like I should have 6 months ago. That way you work independently with your own team, and there's no conflict of interest." "Julian, that's not necessary." "It is," he interrupted, looking at her with that breath-stealing intensity. "Your father is right. I never want you to feel trapped in this relationship for professional reasons. I want you to be with me because you want to be, not because you feel you have to be." Patricia Davis came over, perching on the arm of her husband's chair. "And what about you two? What is this exactly? A temporary fling until the scandal dies down? A real marriage?" Sophia looked at Julian, searching for the answer in those dark eyes that had seen parts of her she didn't even know existed. He met her gaze with a small smile, squeezing her hand. "It's real," they both said at the same time, then laughed at the perfect timing. "I don't know how this is all going to work," Sophia admitted. "I don't know if in 6 months we'll feel as certain as we do now, or if we'll find out this was just a moment of madness, but I do know that I want to try. I know that when I'm with Julian, I feel seen and valued and celebrated, and that's something I'm not willing to throw away just because the timing was strange." "I love your daughter, Mr. Davis," Julian said suddenly, and the impact of the words filled the room. "Maybe it's too soon to say it. Maybe I should wait longer. But the truth is, I've been falling in love with her for months without even realizing it. With her laugh when she thinks no one is listening, with how she treats every person with dignity, with the way she solves problems no one else can see. And yesterday, when I saw her shattered, all I could think was that I would do anything to take that pain away, including marrying her in front of 200 people without a second thought." Sophia felt the tears streaming freely now. Julian turned to her, wiping them away with his thumbs. "I love you, Sophia Davis," he repeated, this time just for her. And I am going to spend the rest of my life proving to you that you were worth every single risk I took. I love you too, Sophia whispered. And saying those words out loud, something inside her broke and mended itself all at once. I don't know when it happened exactly. Maybe it was yesterday. Maybe it was over the last 3 years without me noticing. But it's real. This is real. They kissed, softly and tenderly, forgetting for a moment they had an audience. When they pulled apart, Chloe was clapping through her tears. Patricia was dabbing her cheeks with a tissue. And Gerard was smiling. All right, her father said finally. You have my blessing. But, he held up a warning finger, if you ever hurt my daughter, Mr. Croft, there is nowhere in this world you'll be able to hide from me. I have no plans to hurt your daughter, sir, Julian replied seriously. I plan to love her exactly as she deserves to be loved. Every day. Forever. Patricia stood up, drying her eyes. Well, if you're going to do this, you're going to do it right. No living in sin or any nonsense. You're married, so now comes the important part, getting to know each other, building a life, doing things the right way. Mom, we're already legally married, Sophia pointed out. Legally, yes, but you need a church blessing and a proper honeymoon, and for Julian to meet the rest of the family under less chaotic circumstances. Patricia, breathe, Gerard interrupted with amusement. Let the kids live one day at a time. Chloe came over, hugging Sophia tightly. I am so happy for you, she whispered in her ear. You deserve this. You deserve all of this and more. Thanks for being here, Sophia replied, for believing in me, even when I didn't know what to believe. Always, Soph, always. The next few hours passed in a blur of conversations, coffee, and slow acceptance. Gerard and Julian talked business, discovering common interests. Patricia bombarded Julian with questions about his family, his plans, his intentions. And Sophia watched it all from her seat, feeling something that had been broken inside her begin to heal. When they finally said their goodbyes and got back in the car, the sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Julian didn't start the engine right away. Instead, he turned to Sophia. Are you okay? Better than okay, she answered honestly. For the first time in a long time, I feel like everything is exactly where it's supposed to be. Even the part where your boss confessed his undying love in front of your parents? Especially that part. Sophia smiled. Although, technically, you're not my boss anymore. Now you're just my husband. Just your husband, Julian repeated, tasting the words. I like the sound of that. Me too. They kissed as the sun disappeared behind the skyline, sealing promises that had been born in chaos but strengthened in truth. They didn't know what the future held. They didn't know if the road ahead would be easy or complicated. But they knew one thing with absolute certainty. What they had found in each other was worth every risk, every moment of uncertainty, every curious glance they would receive in the coming months. Because sometimes, the best stories start in the most unexpected places. Sometimes, love shows up when you least expect it, in the most unlikely way, at the most chaotic time. And sometimes, all you need is the courage to say yes, when your entire rational being is screaming at you to say no. Sophia Davis had gone to her wedding expecting to marry the wrong man, but she had ended up marrying the right one, the one who had been there all along, waiting for the perfect moment to remind her that she deserved to be loved exactly as she was. And as they drove toward their future together, hands intertwined and smiles on their faces, they both knew with absolute certainty that this story was just beginning, and it was going to be epic.